Welcome to ADHD Over Tea. I'm Jesse, an ADHD specialist and certified psychological counselor diagnosed when I was 16.
And I'm Tassie, an advocate and project manager diagnosed with ADHD and autism in my 20s.
Each episode will explore what living with ADHD looks like, one cup of tea, one topic at a time, without pretending to have it all figured out.
We invite you to grab yourself a cup of tea, sit back, and enjoy the episode.
Welcome, everyone, to our second episode of ADHD Over Tea. My name is Jesse. I'm an ADHD specialist, and I'm sitting here with Tassie, my co-host. Hi, Tassie.
Hello, Jesse. I'm Tassie, and I am bringing my own experience here.
And also, you have a deep love for tea, which is also one of our main themes over here, ADHD over tea, because first of all, we love tea. Tea is something that's also very common. Almost every single culture, if not every single culture, I imagine, has their own versions of tea. And the idea of also sitting down with someone over tea is something that connects. Spilling the tea, if you want to be gossiping about different things, or stopping for a moment and sipping your tea, zenning yourself. And there's many, many other things. And today, maybe Tassie, you can explain a bit about our tea of the day.
Yes, thank you. So I don't want to spoiler our topic today, but I guess you already read in the title that we're talking about adulting with ADHD and maybe also being perceived as a bit childish. We're going to reframe that. But that's why I decided to go with this children's herbal tea with a dragon on the package.
Love the dragon. It
Fitting the
reminds me of
topic.
that.
Because I am a big fan of these like little cartoons, and unfortunately capitalism catches me liking cute stuff. But yeah, so it's just a herbal tea blend. This one's got chamomile, fennel, lemongrass, and a couple other bits and bobs in German that I can't translate to English right now. But I just generally wanted to talk about herbal tea today. This is tea. Some information about herbal tea is that unlike tea, it's slightly different. So traditional tea is made from this plant called Camellia sinensis, something like that. If you want to Google it, just type in tea plant and then you'll find that the official name. But that plant basically produces tea like black tea, green tea, white tea, oolong tea, and those are traditionally caffeinated teas. And then herbal teas are basically not those teas and are often not caffeinated. This can include dried fruits, herbs, flowers, spices. So you can have very many different blends that have different properties, benefiting different areas of health or have different tastes.
I love that. I'm just wondering, kind of to go back to that. So, at any tea, maybe without caffeine, or not through the tea plant, because I can't remember the actual official name you said. So that would be considered herbal tea. The tea plant itself always has caffeine, if I'm correct.
You can get it decaffeinated, but then they do something to the plant. And I don't drink caffeine, so I guess I'm a bit of a faker here. I don't drink traditional tea, but I'm a big fan of the herbal teas.
It's okay. I almost strictly drink caffeinated tea, so I think we kind of balance ourselves out.
Yeah.
And like before we move on, I was just thinking about my favorite tea as a kid was an herbal tea. It was an almond. It's something I haven't really seen it. Yeah, so much. There was something about it. And I just remember one time I tried to make it for myself. I must have been around 6 or 7 years old. And I put the water in and I put the tea bag in and I tasted it, but it didn't taste right. Now, I didn't realize why, so I tried it again and I tried it with 3 tea bags till I realized that I would always drink it with sugar. And I just didn't put sugar in it. And I just remember this memory of that almond tea. And it's a cute memory, I think. It's sweet. It's funny how I just kind of connected back to that. But I would say that, yeah, since puberty, I've been drinking strictly caffeinated teas almost all the time because I like the kick. I like the caffeine, which is also quite common for people with ADHD.
Fair. Yeah. Maybe this will get you into other teas, but whatever suits.
Yeah. Well, this is also maybe that was my maturity. This is my transition into adulthood. It was my realization about how much I love caffeine and how much it speeds up my life,
I mean, caffeine is seen as a very adult thing, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, the idea also. of what is adult. What is
Yeah.
adulthood? I think it's something that, I mean, it's something everyone faces. And I think it's also, it depends on the society, but most of all, this idea that I should be an adult, let's say, or I should be acting maybe in a mature way, or I should be doing things. It's something that I question a lot. And I think it's interesting today, Stasi, I know you have some statistics over here a bit about the ADHD brain and how it kind of functions maybe in a different way around how it matures or when it matures compared to neurotypical brains. But I just want to also say I see it as a very vague concept in general, what adulthood is or what childish is, because I think in many cases, things that can be seen as childish, I see a lot of adults doing,
Mm.
or adults, for instance, getting upset and getting angry. You see this all the time, or denying reality or not accepting things or getting very upset when someone says the wrong thing to them. You see this at all different ages.
Oh yeah.
So,
Especially with people in power, unfortunately,
oh
currently.
my
Like,
God.
uh,
Yeah, yeah, people who are well well in retirement age,
yeah,
Um, and it's interesting because yeah, there was always this concept, especially when you're young. You want to be older, you want to be big. I want to be a big boy. The difference is I can't wait till I'm 18. And oh my God, when you're 18, you're looking at someone who's 19 or 20, and that's like they seem so much older and so much more mature. And then when you get older, you suddenly realize that no one knows what the hell they're doing.
mm,
This is the feeling I always get, and it's like, yeah, you could be more mature at certain things. You can realize that you can't scream and kick if you don't get what you want, but a lot of
yeah.
it is still there.
I'm just wondering then, where do these expectations come from? Because we do all kind of get these words instilled in us, like that there's these certain things that are adult, but then a lot of people don't seem to do those things. So
Hmm.
I'm wondering where that comes from, I guess, in the way we're brought up.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think well, I mean, there is an aspect. If we just break it down, okay, so you're taught like, okay, you have to sit down and be quiet, and you have to maybe work, or the concept of like, okay, now you're not a kid anymore. You have to get up and do your work and take your own responsibilities and taxes. When I
Hmm.
think about adulthood, I think about taxes.
The
It's just
dreaded
terrible.
taxes.
God,
I was
taxes are
late
terrible.
last year by like 4 months, but that
Really.
was good. They didn't give me any penalty fees, so I'm happy.
Oh.
But now I found a software that works for me.
Okay, well, I'm happy afterwards to hear about that software. But this is a good example, about maybe pushing things off. And I know
Oh
this is
yes,
something very common with ADHD, including myself, that you have to do your taxes, pay your bills, do some kind of bureaucracy, and you keep pushing it off. And then I feel like, oh, I should be doing this now. And I find it also, it's interesting that you brought it up. I really link that, for instance, in my mind to being maybe an adult.
hmm.
Or it's childish of me just to keep pushing it off and expect nothing to happen, you know?
Yeah. I guess being an adult is kind of taking responsibility in a way for
Mm.
all the things you have to do, and a lot of people with ADHD push the important things off, which causes a lot of anxiety. But in a way, it doesn't really make sense, but it's the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't make sense also, but also adding that if I should be an adult or not, it adds also an extra layer of trouble or of judgment, you know what I mean? So I'm not paying my bills, let's say, and I'm feeling bad about it, or I know I should be doing it, and then I'm on top of that saying, that's so immature, that's so childish of yourself, you know? It's like a concept of adding salt to the wound. Saying that, just to kind of get back on track, I was thinking, Tassie, before we were talking that you were researching a bit about certain differences in the functioning of the ADHD brain. I think it's interesting to share some of those statistics, maybe in this context about, okay, what could be maybe perceived by others in the society we live in, which we're living at
Yeah.
the moment in Germany, but what could be seen as childish, which are common traits amongst ADHD.
So I would say that a lot of the things that are perceived as childish for people with ADHD are related to executive functioning, and
Mm,
some of these skills that are under the umbrella of executive functioning skills are planning, decision making, working memory, emotional regulation, impulse control, managing of
Hmm.
complex tasks, and like filtering distractions. And all of these things can lead to maybe having a messy home, not doing your paperwork, being very emotional. And I guess many cultures see those things as immature or failing in your adult life.
Hmm.
But there's some science, I guess, to this based on my research that the prefrontal cortex is in charge
Hmm.
of the executive functioning skills, which most people know are challenged for people with ADHD. So there's differences in the way the prefrontal cortex works for people with ADHD, and that links back to this executive functioning
Hmm.
dilemma.
Yeah, yeah, which can add on, one thing that I know is strong with me. So there's the working memory, the recall memory,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically the immediate. So if something happens, the 1 to 2 immediate memory that can have less memory slots, maybe than a
Mm-hmm.
neurotypical brain. So like, let's say if a neurotypical brain has, for argument's sake, 4 memory slots. If you ask someone with neurotypical, like, what's the color of the sky? So that's what's the color of the sky question. Is it red? Is it blue? Is it green? So they remember the net question. Okay, they say blue. So an ADHD brain can have like 3 memory slots and saying like, okay, what's the color of the sky? Is it red? Is it green? Is it blue? And then I could be like, okay, red, green, blue. What was the question? And then you're like, oh crap, like, and then you start going and start. But knowing that, it took me many years to understand that there were differences in my brain. And I
Mm.
learned that this is it's just something that's quite common with ADHD. And it's not that your brain has any problems. It's not that you have Alzheimer's. It's working differently in that sense. I only found that out many, many years later. And it would have saved me a lot of suffering and pain around that because I was always telling myself there was something wrong with me. And that also feeds into this idea that I should be able to listen to this better, or if I'm not listening to it, then I'm not caring. And then you also get feedback from the world, like,
Mm.
grow up, sit down, you have to do things you don't like to do, okay? And they don't see that behind the scenes also with ADHD. It's not that you don't want to be doing your homework or your taxes or your emails or whatever you have to be doing. Your brain is literally working differently. If it's from the
Yeah.
executive functioning or your dopamine system, you're not getting the same amount of dopamine to do it. And a lot of that interpretates on this lack of wanting,
Mm.
which is also can be interpreted as childish, and that is also internalized in many cases. And then you create this kind of dialogue. You're not a kid anymore.
So I guess in some ways, certain things we can avoid entirely, hopefully, or just to kind of learn from what you just said. But some things we have to do. So I think it's about finding different ways that work for you and finding just adjustments. Like maybe in the first example of forgetting the questions in like important situations, maybe writing notes or something, or asking for things to be repeated, or maybe for printed out versions of something.
Or tell the person ahead of time that I'm going to forget your name. Like, the first 3 times you tell me I'm probably going to forget it, I just do
Yeah,
damage control from the beginning. I say it's not personal. And I also understand that many people forget my name, so I try to speak in third person sometimes when someone's
yeah.
new. Yeah, but it's understanding that you need to also develop certain strategies potentially around
Mm.
it, and it's not that you're just not mature, you know.
That's definitely a skill I lack is the naming. So I hope no future employer hears this, but I guess
Hmm.
it's just I got to be open. I work a lot with managing teams when I work in event management,
Hmm.
and I just cannot remember the names. It's so difficult because there's always so many people involved. I always feel bad about it, but I just try and work around it.
It's interesting because, a few things it sounds like is happening. One is that it's harder for you, maybe the executive functioning and the memory, but also part of ADHD for many people is having very strong emotional reactions, which
Mhm.
shoot out very quickly. So you have on one hand, you don't remember it, and then you're shot with this full dose of feeling guilt and bad about it, which
Mm,
clouds your memory even more, in many cases. So it's not
mm,
like, you can JC, like JC or JZ. You can start playing around, finding different ways to kind of remember names. Just as an example, I make a little song, I split it up into syllables or something of the sort.
Hmm.
But in order to do that, you need to be in the state of actually learning. And in many cases, having a strong emotional reaction kills your creativity. It puts you into like a loop of like, oh, I should be doing this, I should have done it better, I should be like.
Hmm.
Um, and these are things that are at work. And there's a lot of techniques, and I think each one, probably what works best for you in many cases. But a lot of it,
Yeah, with the name
well,
thing, I don't know if we're particularly talking about the name thing, but the name thing is something I definitely do not have under control currently.
yeah.
Just if you're not working with me regularly and it's been a couple months, I don't
Mhm.
know your name most likely. So yeah, that's
Well, how,
just
how
the
do you how
way
do
it
you
is.
cope with that? I'm curious. Maybe you can share if you have some kind of techniques to
Uh,
cover your tracks.
just avoiding using their name when I'm like talking about.
Like, hey,
I'm
dude.
exposing myself. But if I'm like doing a briefing for a team and there's like
Mhm.
certain people who are like boss staff,
Mhm.
I'm just saying, so everyone who's boss staff, and this is what you got to do instead of being like Bob, Tracy, and
Mhm.
Chad. These are your tasks for today. I just say everyone who's boss staff, and
Mm.
or I have a list of the names, and then I just use the list, but I don't have faces to it, so I just yeah. So I just guess I try and avoid the names. If
Mhm.
I know the name, I'll use it, but it takes a long time for me to remember. Like it'll take a couple months
Are you
usually.
afraid to use someone's name that you remember next to someone's name that you don't remember? Or is that usually like a
Um,
buffer?
no, I guess whoever I don't know the name for, who's
Hmm.
standing next to the person I know the name for, is kind of not included
Hmm.
in my naming.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of stress though. I mean, I can relate to that. And I'm sure a lot of people listening, assuming there's a lot of people listening,
Yeah.
then they could probably they can probably relate. It's the thing about the names is a killer because people get insulted.
Hmm. Maybe we
It,
can talk about this whole like memory loss thing in another episode. Do a
yeah, yeah,
deep
yeah.
dive.
I think it's yeah, it's more than, it's not just the memory, it's not just remembering it, but it's this I think it comes back to this feeling guilty or feeling scared that you're going to be discovered. And
Hmm.
this is like I think this is something that's very underlying for almost everyone I speak to with ADHD, this kind
Yeah.
of fear that
Someone
certain
will.
things are going to be figured out.
Yeah, yeah. So it's definitely masking, like trying to hide the fact that I don't remember people's names.
Hmm.
Because it's expected off of you, I guess, especially if you're someone who's leading a team of people. So,
Hmm.
but I have other strengths that are valuable, so I
Yeah.
guess it's not been that big of an issue.
Yeah, yeah, and it's true. It doesn't also the fact that it doesn't what does that mean about you as a person
And
if
I'm
you break it down?
always like when I'm working with other people, I'm always very like on eye level with them. I'm always very warm
Mm.
and personal with them. So I feel like people still feel taken care of or acknowledged or appreciated when I work with them, even if I forget their name. At least that's what I hope.
Yeah, no, I think that's important also to break it down
Mm.
and say, actually, okay, what is the name? It's nice to remember the person's name, but when you remember someone's name, it shows that there maybe makes them feel appreciated.
Yeah.
So it's not about the name necessarily, it's about the person actually feeling appreciated.
I know that some people, I've heard this like strategy that some people just repeat like if someone says like, "Hi, I am Tom," then it's like,
Hmm.
then you repeat the name. It's like, "Oh, nice to meet you, Tom. I'm da 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 da."
Hmm.
And then you try and use the name in the conversation just so you've used it, and hopefully it helps
Hmm.
picking up the name. Haven't tried that yet. I think I've tried it like once or twice actually, but haven't like properly tried it.
Hmm.
Maybe we can talk about like how is this whole adulting topic showing up in your life maybe currently, or how has it personally showed up for you in the past?
I think so. I'm just coming. I've had a very like unorthodox career path or
Hmm.
adult path, I would say in general, which over the years I've also discovered it's not uncommon for people with ADHD to move around a lot. I actually was in 7 different schools till I finished high school, and then I've done a lot of like different kinds of studies. I started also out as a filmmaker, and then when I was a filmmaker, I developed my own technique of using video as a therapeutic tool. And I developed my own psychological approach called emotional consulting of using video to film yourself and watching it right after. And then from that, I discovered video therapy. And then I got into narrative therapy, which is take talk therapy. And only then I started pivoting into ADHD. And while I was doing that, I was teaching also in schools and I was working in different random jobs and freelancing. And part of that is like it's all over the place.
Mm.
And society also teaches you that you should usually pick one career and focus on it. And there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And I could never do that. It was never even like an option for me. And so I think part of that also really clouded this idea of what is adulthood. Because I think from as young as I remember myself, I always took myself seriously like I am an adult. Or it's not like a child or adult. I'm like, I am me. There was no hierarchy in my mind. I was like maybe younger, or I would feel like, oh, it's not fair that, to act that they could do this and I can't, but I was never like, I'm just a kid. I was always in my mind fully grown. Actually, when I really started digging, part of it is also a trauma response about feeling like from a young age I have to really control everything around me.
Yeah.
But that's another topic. But this idea that once I get to a certain age or once I'm 13, 14, 15, I am an adult, I never had that because I just see people as people in a certain way. And not in like a hippie, everyone's equal kind of way. No, I just see like, okay, everyone is acting how they're acting. And as a kid, I took myself very seriously. And now as an adult, I'm looking at other adults, or as you mentioned, politicians who are super old, okay, acting in such childish ways that I think everyone is acting more childish. It's not like everyone are adults. Everyone's acting quite childish because we're human beings and we're also kind of, in a way, technologically, we developed a lot faster than we did emotionally. So we're all, I think, still in a certain way, monkeys, jumping around, getting emotional over different things, and trying to make sense and label things. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh yeah, it definitely does.
I'm curious what you think. Okay, what is adulthood for you, if you could explain it?
Stressful now. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had moments in my life where I've just felt like, my God, I wish I wouldn't have to deal with all of these things, which everyone does, I guess. But still, I personally feel like I grew up really fast and I wanted to grow up. There's certain
Hmm.
aspects about me that could be perceived as quite childish, but in other ways, I've um, matured maybe even too fast. That's what
Mm.
therapists have sometimes told me. So, an example for this is that I first of all moved to England on my own at 16, and
Mm.
I went to university at 17, and I graduated with my bachelor's degree at 20, and then I had a corporate full-time job, and I've also always been very responsible and empathetic and resilient and like seeking for stability. But
Hmm.
it's always felt super challenging, which I guess it is. And then I eventually quit my job because I was feeling quite burnt out. Now I have a slightly different job. I work part time in a marketing agency and then I work as a freelancer because I started to feel like, oh my God, this super structured, like high pressure environment was just too much for me. And
Hmm.
I feel like the way I've designed my life right now is a bit too much for me, but that's something I'm definitely working on more reflected,
Mm.
with awareness.
I
But
love
yeah,
that.
so I guess I'm trying to answer your question by saying that I feel like I've lived kind of the traditional lifestyle, like being independent financially quite early as well and living on my own.
16 moving countries and yeah, and having a degree by 20 is
Yeah,
normal on steroids, I think.
definitely, definitely. I feel like I realized that it's something that's not really sustainable though. I was definitely pushing myself a lot. So I'm still a
Hmm.
high achiever. I've got high standards of myself and I want to do a lot, but I need to be
Hmm.
realistic as well and take a step back. And I feel like I've also got these thoughts that, like, I recently thought about this after like a therapy session, that a lot of my identity is connected to my achievements, and but
Hmm.
I realized that I cannot do as much because it's just not sustainable. And so stepping back from doing as much is kind of affecting the way I see myself, because
Hmm.
a lot of my identity is to do with work or what I achieve. So now figuring out how to not do as much kind of makes me feel like I'm not as put together and in a way adult. So, and that's,
I
I've
see.
always wanted to be, I wanted to be ahead of people. I felt like that was something I felt proud of, and like I was
Hmm.
was succeeding in life. I didn't feel like other people were like inferior. That sounds a bit judgmental, but I just felt
Hmm.
like that's what I needed to do.
To be better. So you were also, I mean, I think it's really fascinating that part of you mentioned was connected to this idea that of achieving and maybe, being better or, achieving more and faster than other people. But as you're getting older, maybe you feel like, okay, when you have to slow down, part of you maybe feels like it's less of adulting.
Yes.
But I'm also hearing a certain wisdom, which is maybe maturity, saying, I want to be doing this, or I believe that I had to, but I'm also understanding that it's not realistic.
Yeah, and it's a constant challenge. Like right now,
Hmm.
I've definitely not got this all figured out, and obviously we never have everything fully figured out. But
Hmm.
I guess I'm on my journey of making my life suit me more and
Yeah.
using my strengths. But it can be a bit challenging, especially the way I think of
Yeah.
things and I seek stability and the kind of lifestyle that maybe, yeah, would suit me better feels a bit unstable right now because it's,
Hmm.
yeah, might
Yeah.
involve less money or, yeah.
It's part of the process also. I think, it's not easy. It's not easy to be alive. It's not easy for anyone as human beings, I think, particularly in this day and age where everything feels so maybe uncertain
Mm,
with ADHD and also with autistic traits, I can imagine, adds extra layers. And I think also part of this idea of learning to let go of certain ideas when your body is saying no is actually maybe part of this adulting or part of this, maturing to a certain sense or wisdom, maybe I would call it.
yeah.
And, as you're talking, I'm kind of feeling in my mind this shift into the older I get, the wiser I get based on my own experiences and becoming more aware of my body. And I can hear a lot of myself also in this drive to, I have to do this, I have to make something business, it has to succeed. People have to think that, you know, as I get older, I'm learning how to let go a little bit of that. And for
Mm,
me, it's been getting better and better because I realize actually a lot of these ideas were also implanted by society we live in or feelings of like a failure. If I don't manage to do that, if I don't make enough money, if I don't have a cool enough job, if I don't have enough relationships, if I don't, there's so many things, then there's something fundamentally wrong with me. Learning how to understand what is actually working, what's not working, I think, is something that really kind of leads into that. And I'm thinking about the adulting or being an adult. I don't even like that concept. I like maybe maturing or looking at a less mature version of myself.
I also, because I'm all about the data, I did some research on ADHD and employment, and I think obviously work is a big part of adulting, and people who don't have a stable job or constantly switching jobs, not progressing in the career, are often seen as less adult or immature, which is
Hmm.
not great, obviously. but it's definitely something that's affecting people with ADHD more than neurotypical people. Like the National Institutes of Health put out this information that people with ADHD are like a third of them are like constantly unemployed, and that's
Mm.
even higher for autistic people. So that number is apparently 30% higher than with neurotypical people. And then also people with ADHD, according to the ADDA, which is the Attention Deficit Disorder Association, more like 60% more likely to be fired from jobs, or
Mhm.
and 3 times more likely to quit their jobs impulsively.
That's like I'm smiling because that's like my whole early 20s. That's like being fired and quitting. I can't even count how many jobs I've had like that. I can
Yeah.
vouch for that.
So, yeah, basically what I'm trying to say with this is that it's definitely in a way true, but I guess it's also important to not put too much pressure on ourselves for this. Like, I think there needs
Mhm.
to be some system changes as well, and for employers to have more information and support people in the workplace. And I hope that we can do an episode on working with ADHD in the future. Also, Jesse,
Mhm.
maybe you can talk a bit more about your experience, and also I know you know a lot about entrepreneurship and freelancing. That's
Yeah.
very common in people with ADHD as well.
Yeah, yeah. So on the other side, speaking as someone who I have had so many, especially in the beginning, I couldn't hold the job for the life of me, you know? I would either do it, get really bored and quit, or after 2 days, I start giving advice to the boss because I see some flaw in the system, and they were all in shock. They're like, "What?" I kept hearing, "Jesse, you're a great guy, but I've never had a worker like this in my life. I don't know what to do with you." Because, I had problems with hierarchy. If I see something that could be done better, I say it, you know? And if it's
Mm.
not being done, or if it's some stupid system that I see is not working and someone's implementing it and acting like I'm the boss, I lose respect for the people in 1 second.
That's very
And I'm
common
like,
in ADHD.
totally. And on top of that, you also have a strong sense of justice, and it's like, why is this person? I mean, so again, I don't really like statistics in general. I think it's also in many cases it's the people who they're doing the research on. In many cases, are, let's say, college men, whoever's around the area where the research is being done, and they want to make a few bucks, or I don't know what. I think there's a lot of also prejudice. I'm not saying, again, all, but I usually take it with a grain of salt. Saying that, there's a statistic that says
Mm.
30% of the entrepreneurs in the world have ADHD.
Mm.
I like that statistic, so of
So
course I'm gonna
maybe, yeah, yeah.
connect to that more. But the idea is, it's true what you're saying. It sounds like I can definitely imagine that it's much harder for people with ADHD to hold a job, and according to all these associations. But that's not necessarily a bad thing if you can be self-employed, which a, it has a lot of challenges.
Mm.
But it also allows you to be your own boss and to create your own hours or to develop new things, find solutions in many cases. And so I think part of maybe the ADHD brain is just really not designed in many cases to be doing these
Mm.
corporate jobs. I don't think most people's brains are designed for these corporate jobs, okay? I think
No.
it's a terrible system, but the idea is it can be very beneficial actually to dive into your own things. And especially nowadays when AI and everything is disrupting so many industries, your ability to think for yourself, be critical, get new ideas, but also pivot very quickly if something's not working can actually be, I think, a big benefit. And so I'm just showing that other side with the challenges, and it all comes basically down to just really understanding your pros and cons. And I've mentioned this quite a few times, I think, not today, but the idea that you can call ADHD a disorder, you can call it a superpower, it's whatever works for you. But in the end of the day, if you don't kind of notice that there are definitely challenges, but there are also a lot of benefits, and start understanding what is working for you and what you can start leveraging and what you can use in order to, create a good life for yourself, then things are going to be very difficult. Because if you're just looking at the negative aspect or what's wrong and what's hard about it, which is important, you're not also noticing and you're missing out on a lot of different things. And so that's why my personal approach is that ADHD is just a different type of brain with its pros and cons, which actually can work well if you allow yourself to just understand how your brain works and go with it. So my experience about work and transferring different jobs and having to kind of reinvent myself in an entrepreneuric way, I guess, around work, as I mentioned, is quite common amongst people with ADHD. I think we should have a whole episode on this, you know. I'd love to dive into that because it's actually quite fascinating, and I think part of having an ADHD brain in this age can be quite beneficial. But maybe we just let's kind of get back to the topic and maybe do a little wrap up over here.
For sure, yeah. So I think it would be cool to wrap up by talking about redefining adulthood. And yeah, I think for me personally, there's like
Mm.
4 points I think that lead into this. And the first one would be letting go of traditions and societal expectations, because most people don't really live up to the high standards that society enforces on us.
That I'm curious.
I think it ties into the next point I was going to say, is
Mm.
identifying and using your strengths. So by looking at those
Mm.
points, I think the first point I mentioned can be a lot easier.
So basically understanding like what's working and what's not, and then just redefining what adulthood is or what this concept is for you. Because actually, as we're talking, it seems like even between us, we have very different understandings of what that means or what it means for us. And I'm, I think for everyone, it's one of these things that everyone might just have a very different idea of what it means. So coming back to what you think and even analyzing what you think and maybe understanding where you picked up these ideas to begin with.
Yeah.
Did you come up with this idea yourself, or is this a fourth grade teacher who told you you should be working harder on your tests?
Exactly. I think what you think and what you also care about. So
Hmm.
maybe it is important for you to be able to do this certain thing, like, I don't know, your paperwork, which is obviously important, but
Hmm.
then maybe just figuring out how to address that in a healthy way without beating yourself up.
I like the not beating yourself up. It's always a challenge I find, but it's
Yeah, I think that ties into my next point, which was like
uh-huh.
acknowledging these challenges and seeking support or implementing accommodations. So just trying to figure out how to do these challenging tasks that are
Mm.
kind of mandatory in adulting, but figuring out how to do them in a way that suits you better, and maybe even getting
Hmm.
help to be able to get through those things.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah,
the big one, self-compassion, which
self-compassion.
is easier said than done.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. You know, the self-compassion is, even if you don't like it, that's try to just be as kind as you can. And one thing I try to do is I also try to like imagine if someone, a good friend of mine was going through it. You know, a good or my little brother or something that I'm like, okay, someone you tend to really care about and you know, if they're being really hard on themselves, you know, I'm usually the one saying, come on, don't be so hard on yourself. It's okay.
Mm.
You're calming that person down. So to try to also imagine me talking to them in that state. That's something that usually helps me with my self-compassion because I tend to have a lot more compassion for other people. When it
Yep.
comes to myself, the expectations go through the roof, you know?
Cool. And yeah, lastly, I think also what you talked about a lot, remembering that nobody seems to have their stuff together, and like we all just have different views on this topic, on adulting, and
Mm-hmm.
honestly, it's okay. Don't
It's
overthink it.
okay. Well, and you're doing it anyway. You know, one thing I keep reminding myself, if you do something and you're beating yourself up on it or you're not, it's the same, you're still doing it. You're still in the same situation. And I try to also be very specific. So instead of saying I'm not being an adult, I'm saying what do I want to be doing better? Do I want to be doing my taxes better? Do I want to be now listening to people more, or do I want to, yeah, not be reactive, but to try to break it down and the more the older I get or the more wise, mature adult I get, I realize that I just try to stop labeling things as much because it doesn't usually help, you know?
Mm.
and just to focus on what is it I want to change or not change, as opposed to just saying, if I don't do this, I'm acting childish. Because that actually doesn't really help much. Besides, in many cases, just make me feel worse.
Yeah. Okay, I think it's a wrap.
Hmm.
Uh, I guess we've got to do the mandatory things of saying, please give us a follow. We'd also like
Hmm.
to hear your feedback. Maybe you've got ideas about what topics we could talk about next.
Yeah, or also your ideas about what is adulthood for you, or even more important, what's your favorite childhood tea?
Oh yes, that would be
Is it
interesting as
herbal?
well.
Have you been drinking caffeine your whole life as a young
Oh
child?
goodness.
I'm very interested to hear. And yeah, it's been a pleasure having this podcast. Thank you, Tassie, and thank you everyone who's been listening over here.
Thank you.
And we'll see you in the next podcast.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.